Well, we are back. Welcome back to the Life from the Wrist podcast. Welcome to episode 200 of this series. Pretty incredible to think that. Well, first off, apologies for the hiatus. I know that it's been a little bit of time since we last posted. Things got a little bit crazy, but we're back, and it's also incredible to think that we are on season 7 of this podcast. And we are also on episode 200. It's pretty fitting, I think, that we are back recording a podcast with updates for you on what's going on in the watch world, as well as some reviews about different vintage watches with episode 200. And I'm very excited to get back into doing this and sharing the watch industry with you and watch enthusiasts out there. So excited that it's episode 200. Hopefully we can have a little bit of fun in this episode. Really, I wanted to just provide a little bit of an overview of 3 vintage watches that we recently got in, and I'll leave links obviously in the show notes of the podcast so you can take a look at them, because they really are beautiful vintage watches. Very excited to record the usual videos that we do on our YouTube channel for these, because I really do think that in the metal these watches are absolutely phenomenal. I do hope, before we kind of dive into that, I really do hope that you've had a good 2026. I think the last podcast that we uploaded was April 2025, so it's definitely been over about a year and 4 months since we did this, and I really hope the last year has been great for you and you've had a lovely time. Pretty incredible how quickly time goes, especially because I think we started this podcast during COVID, and time flies when you're having fun, I guess, or I think just happens that way. All right, so 3 new vintage watches. I think we actually have another one that's coming in, I think, next week. Well, the week that you're actually listening to this is when they are expected to come in. So we'll cover that on another episode of the podcast. But for now, what we'll do is we'll go over these 3, and hopefully you enjoy taking a look at some of the pictures. Again, links will be in the show notes. So the first watch is honestly my absolute favorite. It's an incredible 1957 Longines automatic reference 1042. Now, this watch I love because of how it looks. So it's a 33 millimeter Longines automatic watch that was manufactured. Obviously, the movement was manufactured in Switzerland, imported into the U.S., and then cased in the U.S. I'll get back to that in a little bit here. But what's incredible about this watch is it's got this sort of really, really nice warm champagne sort of gold tone dial with a beautiful textured outline where you have your hour markers, and then this sort of center disc that has your seconds hands. This Longines 1042 is, in my opinion, one of the nicest vintage Longines that we've actually had on the channel. So again, reference 1042, it has a really nice sort of mid-century design with the textured dial that I mentioned. It's got applied Arabic numerals at 12, 3, 6, and 9, as well as contrasting baton hour markers. It's got a really nice classic Dauphine style hands with a center second sweeping hand that obviously extends just to that sort of center disc that I had mentioned, and I think gives it a really distinct 1950s characteristic with a very understated period correct look to it. One of the things I also like is, every 5 seconds of the seconds indicators are luminescent plots that have aged really nicely. For the reference 1042, the other versions of this watch that I have seen typically have a white dial. And so when I saw this dial, I thought, wow, this is quite a unique sort of champagne dial. And then when you look a little bit closer, what you'll notice is around the outside of the dial, you'll see a really faint white color. And I think what you're basically seeing there is the dial, that section of the dial really has not been exposed to any sunlight. So you have, I do believe that the original dial to this watch was indeed white or cream, and then has faded into this beautiful champagne color. It's really, really warm. It's aged evenly across the watch. The luminescent plots match the color, the champagne golden color that the dial's patina has developed over the, I guess the last almost 70 years. And it really matches the 10 karat gold filled case really nicely. It has a very very thin understated lugs, and then where the crown actually integrates into the watch is sort of on the bottom underside of the quite distinct top of the case. So it really has a nice look to it. So as I mentioned, the case is 10 karat gold filled. It also features a stamp on both the outside and the inside case back that says S&W, which is the mark of Schwab and Wuspart Case Company, which was a New York-based case manufacturer that produced cases for a number of prestigious Swiss watch brands, one of those being Longines. And this was a very typical practice by Swiss watch companies, Longines being one of them, where they would essentially import their Swiss movements into the US and then had case manufacturers based in the US who then married, obviously they sourced those cases from the case makers, Schwab and Wuspart being one of them, and then would put their movements into them and sell them under the Longines name. So very, very typical business model. I think it was mainly cheaper for them to do so instead of importing 10 karat gold filled cases. So quite a typical 1950s practice. The watch also runs on the Swiss made 19 AS Longines automatic movement, which honestly is a very, very good looking movement. It's quite a, if you look at the actual where the bridges and all that are located, it's quite a small movement. If you check out the pictures, what you'll notice is a pretty large outside area where the automatic rotor can kind of move, and obviously the bridge where the balance wheel is attached to is signed LXW, again describing the fact that the movement was imported into the US. I think this is a particularly appealing example of this of a Longines from 1957. I think this is a great example for Longines collectors and enthusiasts that are really looking for a very authentic 1950s dress watch with a ton of character when you're looking at that dial. And I think the combination of being from 1957, the 19 AS movement, as well as just the warmth of the patina, makes it a really sort of evocative vintage watch that I think is really beautiful. Again, I think one of the nicest examples of Longines watches that we've had and being able to cover on Life on the Wrist. I'm trying to think of another example that I've been so impressed with the overall looks of it. I'm also just quickly scrolling on our website to see if I can find another example of one that I really liked. But really, I think it's definitely up there with some of the best quality and looks that we've definitely covered. The second watch that we were able to get into is actually quite a distinctive Omega watch. It's the reference LLU 6289. This is another watch from Omega. Obviously, we've covered a ton of Omegas on the channel. This one, I actually think of the one of the watches that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the Omega chronograph that we had the pleasure of having, the reference 2279 from 1950. It was in such great condition and a really beautiful stainless steel chronograph, and a really cool story behind it as well, with the phenomenal manual wind caliber 321 movement. It really was an honor to be able to cover that on the channel. This is obviously not a chronograph. It's a time-only Omega automatic, running on the caliber 550, which is a pretty iconic and well-known movement from Omega. Again, based in 1966, manufactured 1966. It's another example of really elegant mid-century Omega design with a fairly warm dial with applied hour markers, classic Dolphin style hands, and a slender center seconds hand that obviously sweeps around the dial in a really nice way. It also has kind of a freckled dial, so obviously there's this is the product of moisture reacting to the dial of this watch, but has created this really nice sort of freckled spotted dial. This obviously is signs of age, and for a watch that is, I guess, what is that? That's 50 plus years old, is pretty standard. It has a really nice warm tone to it and matches the 10 karat gold filled case. The case is signed. The inside of the case back is stamped with Ross, which indicates that it was made by Ross Watch Case Corporation located in New York. And this is, again, similar to the practice that Longines had with Schwab and Wuspart, but they would essentially import the movements into the US and then source cases from case manufacturers that were based here. This one, again, you can see when you look at the movement, you'll see OXG, which is the stamp, the import stamp that notes that it was imported by Omega into the US market. The case obviously shows signs of wear, which match its age, and gives it a really nice sort of vintage appeal to it. There's a few things that are unfortunate. I think the crown is signed with the Omega logo, and although looking at it and kind of the color of it compared to the case, I would imagine that it's probably a replacement crown that rather than the original crown that was fitted to the watch. And then if you look at the case back, there are some signs of wear, numerous scratches and scuffs and surface abrasions, as well as a part of the case back that seems to have come off a little bit, but you can see those in the photos. I think it overall is an honest watch and gives it that vintage characteristics you would expect. I think it's a fairly appealing example for Omega collectors and enthusiasts who like the 1960s sort of automatic dress watches that are understated and have a really nice vintage appeal to it. I think the Caliber 550 is a very famous movement, well-running automatic movement from Omega. The Ross case and natural patina really gives it an evocative look to it and is a classic example of Omega mid-century design. The last watch that we will be covering in the coming weeks is a watch from a brand that we've covered before, but is not super common for our channel, and that is it's a Caravelle, which I think we've only maybe covered. I want to say maybe one other Caravelle on the channel. I'm trying to remember. I believe it was a dive watch, and bear with me while I just scroll the website to see if I can find it. But this example is a really nice size. So we covered a Caravelle automatic diver many years ago, and it ironically has the a different movement to it, but it was a really cool example because the example that we had covered many years ago had this really cool seconds hand that had a plane on it. So you'd have this plane kind of going around the dial. It was a real 1970s example that I thought was quite cool. I believe it was the reference 745 and had this jet plane that would kind of circle the dial. The example that we have is not that. It's a 38 millimeter automatic Caravelle with the day-date complication. Based on what I can tell, this watch is from 1973. I'll get a little bit more into detail on that in a second. What's really cool about this watch is it has such a striking look to it. It's got a really beautiful slate gray or matte gray dial with these really bold red, these distinct bold red accents that are mostly on the hands and the hour markers. It has oversight applied Arabic numerals at 12, 6, and 9 that are complemented by this contrasting rectangular hour markers. And then you have these luminescent plots that are around the outside of the dial. I think this the vibrant nature of the red really stands out on that matte gray dial, and the case is also stainless steel, so you've got this really red distinct accents that stand out nicely. I'd also say that this, in contrast with the way that this 1970s case is laid out, I think is a particular appealing period aesthetic that's classic for the 1970s. The watch like I mentioned, has a day-date complication at 3 o'clock and runs on the Caliber 11 UK ACB movement that is actually based off of the highly regarded A. Shields AS 1916 movement. What's really cool is this movement has the quick setting functionality. So if you press the crown in, you can actually change the date that is displayed on the watch. And this kind of makes it an unusual feature for an automatic movement of this era, but also a unique sort of piece to add to the aesthetic of this watch. I mentioned that the date of this watch was quite interesting. So if you look on the inside of the movement, the movement is actually stamped with N2, and Boulevard. This is a stamp that Boulevard does to identify the dates of their movements. And like I mentioned, the movement is stamped with N2, which corresponds to the year of manufacture being 1972. But if you look at the case is actually stamped N3, which is corresponding to a manufacture date of 1973. The 1 year difference here is what kind of makes this interesting, but it isn't unusual for vintage watches, most likely indicating that the 1972 dated movement was subsequently fitted into a case that was produced in 1973. And so what likely is happened here is the movement was probably made, right at the end of 1972, case made right at the beginning of 1973, and these were brought together. This is kind of an interesting additional detail about this watch that makes it a little bit more unique. Now, there is obviously the possibility that the case back might not be original to the watch, although I don't have any reason to believe that it wouldn't go to this watch. But it is a possibility. But again, it's not uncommon to see cases and a 1 year difference between the case and movement in Bulova manufactured watches. As I mentioned, it's running on the 11 UK ACB movement, which is based off of the A Shield AS 1916 movement. This watch has the center seconds and day-to-day functionality, vibrating at 21,600 vibrations per hour. And there are examples of this movement in 17, 21, and 25 joules, depending on the variant. And this is this version has the 17 joule version. So all in all, I think the 1973 case, 1972 movement, the distinct red and gray dial, and really beautiful 1970s stainless steel case come together to make an unmistakably period-correct 1970s Caravelle watch, and I think is something that can fit very easily into modern-day watches. It gives me the feeling of a lot of the Seikos that people love to wear, and I think is a really beautiful example. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at some of these watches. First episode back, episode 200, and what a way to do that with covering 3 really, really beautiful watches that I think are unique in their own ways, and a great way to continue the Life on the Wrist podcast. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to follow this channel so you're notified when we upload. We obviously cover vintage watches pretty heavily, but also do things about watches in the news and try and keep you up to date on what's going on. We obviously love vintage watches, so if you want to chat with us, be sure to send us a message on our website or any of our social medias. There'll be links in the show notes to all of that. You can check out photos of these watches on lifeonthewrist.com, and I encourage you to stay tuned for videos where we'll cover these watches individually. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode 200 of the Life on the Wrist podcast, and we will definitely see you in the next one.